want to learn three things here. I want to learn, number one, the danger of thinking too highly of yourself. Number two, the danger of thinking too lowly of God. And thirdly, getting out of the danger zone. The danger of thinking too highly of yourself, the danger of thinking too lowly of God, and getting out of the danger zone. I want to begin this morning by sharing with you one of my finer moments in my life. My senior year in high school, I was the captain of the football team, and during football season, the football players would wear their football jerseys to school on Fridays. And the really cool players on the football team, there weren't many, but I was one of them. We'd roll up our sleeves, right, a few rolls to make sure everybody saw our biceps under our jerseys. Because what you really wanted to happen as a high school football player is to walk past a group of girls and they would ask you to flex or something like that. So here I am. I'm walking through the halls of school with a couple other football buddies on my way to English class, and I was fidgeting in my pocket to get something, and as I did, I dropped a dollar bill out of my pocket. I didn't realize it till about 5 steps later. So when I realized I dropped it, I went back in the crowded hallway, and just as I got to the place where I dropped it, another student reached down and picked up it right before I did. And it became clear to me very quickly that this student had picked up my dollar bill with no intention of giving it back to me, even though he knew it wasn't his, right? And so I don't remember the boy's name, but I do remember that he was not, quote, popular like I was. He didn't have a lot of friends. He was very overweight and scraggly in appearance, and he probably, honestly, could have used that dollar a whole lot more than I needed it. And so, being the meek and humble captain of the football team that I was, with my rolled-up sleeves and gelled hair and penny loafers, probably. When he refused to give me my dollar back, I got up in his face, and I told him in no uncertain terms that it was mine and that he better give it back to me. And so he finally gave me my dollar back, and I rejoined my posse on the way to English class. And when we reached the classroom, I said to my friends, because I was so flustered, "Can you believe that guy? Doesn't he know who I am?" And they laughed at me. They probably should have punched me. So that was one of my finer moments. So why do I tell you that? Well, to surface the very real danger of thinking too highly of yourself, right? When you think too highly of yourself, you will mistreat people, because when we think too highly of ourselves, we are correspondingly thinking lowly of others. When we think too highly of ourselves, we are usually basing our high estimation of ourselves on something we've done well, right? So I'm a good person, taxes, I give 10%, I don't swear, I don't view pornography like some guys do, I've held down a job for years, I haven't broken any laws, it's not like I've killed anybody. And for me at the time it was, I'm a good football player, I'm talented, I'm popular, I was elected captain, etc., etc. When you think too highly of yourself, and you find some merit in yourself to sit on, and you let it puff you up. And this is the exact opposite of faith in Christ. By the way, at this time I was a Christian, yet I didn't really understand what that meant. Well, in this story today, we see a woman of remarkable faith because she did not think too highly of herself, nor did she think too lowly of God. The woman we read about here was a Cyrophonician woman, which means she was a Syrian from Phoenicia, so she was a Gentile. And again, we talked about, I think a couple weeks ago, what's a Gentile? A Gentile is basically anyone who's not Jewish. Okay? So you're either Jewish descent or you're a Gentile. So she was a Gentile, and she comes to Jesus while Jesus is on vacation and asks him to do some work for her. And Jesus is like, "I'm on vacation, lady, leave me alone." He didn't quite say that, but verse 24 says, Jesus left that place and went to the vicinity of Tyre. He entered a house and did not want anyone to know it. Yet he could not keep his presence secret. So Jesus goes with his disciples to be alone, but this woman discovers him and is persistent with her need. In fact, Mark records in verse 26, she kept asking. Matthew records in his account that his disciples came to him and urged him, that is Jesus, send her away for she keeps crying out to us. Okay? So this woman is like Bob from the movie What About Bob? She won't go away. Okay? And so in response to her persistent request, Jesus seems to insult her. He says, first let the children eat all they want, for it is not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs. The New King James Version says, let the little children be filled first, for it's not good to take the children's bread and throw it to the little dogs. So did Jesus just call her a dog? Last time I called a woman a dog, it did not go well for me. Okay? So what's Jesus doing here? Was he just trying to get rid of her? Was he annoyed by her? Was he really mad because somebody found him on vacation? I don't think so. A couple things to consider. First of all, I want us to consider the word Mark used for dog. Right, so in the New Testament, there are two words used for the word dog. The first one is the Greek word kuon, which refers to a dog or a hound, and when it's usually used in an insulting way. So for example, in Philippians 3 verse 2, Paul gives a warning about certain people, and he said, beware of dogs, beware of evildoers. Okay, so this is the word kuon, and is used as a derogatory term to describe people who are filled with evil intentions. Another example of this would be in Revelation 22:15, and talking about those who will not inherit eternal life. John said, but outside are dogs and sorcerers and sexually immoral and murderers and idolaters and whoever loves and practices a lie. So dog in this instance is the word kuon again, and is obviously not used in a positive way. But this is not the word Mark uses. Okay? The word for dog that Mark uses is the word kunarion, which refers to a puppy. In fact, your version may actually say, it's not good to take the children's bread and throw it to the little dogs. Okay? So this was not an insult to this lady. He was not calling her a female dog or somehow talking down to her. So what was he doing? Well, here's what he was doing. We know that Jesus spent his entire ministry ministering to the Jewish people. In other words, Jesus didn't go to Rome. He didn't go to Spain. In his life, he did not go to Egypt, or in his ministry, he didn't go to Egypt or anywhere else to minister there. John tells us that Jesus came to his own, and his own did not receive him, right? So who were his own? Well, his own were the Israelite people. So the Israelite people were the people God chose to work through in order to save the entire world. And when Jesus came to earth, Jesus came specifically to them. So when Jesus says, let the children be filled first, or let the little children be filled first, he was referring to the Israelite people. He was saying, I've been sent to minister to the Israelites. I've been sent to preach to the Israelites. He was not saying, woman, you can't eat at this table. He was saying, I've been sent to the lost sheep of Israel. I must feed them first. Your time has not yet come. Okay? So this makes sense because we know that it was not until Jesus rose from the dead and ascended back into heaven that his disciples will be commissioned to go to the Gentiles. Right? So this was not an insult to her. It was a statement of his particular commission. And what's remarkable about this encounter is not really what Jesus said so much as what this woman says in response. She says in verse 28, yes, Lord, yet even the puppies under the table eat from the children's crumbs. So I want you to see the significance of that statement. Notice that this woman did not get offended. Okay, she didn't say, well, that's stupid. I'm just as good as the Israelite people. What are you, prejudiced? Well, I'm not good enough for you? Why can't I be first to eat? I'm going somewhere else. And she didn't say any of that, right? She didn't arrogantly try to give reasons why Jesus should heal her daughter now. She did not think she deserved something from God or that she had somehow merited some of his favor. She didn't think too highly of herself. Right? She said, "Yes, Lord, I know I don't deserve a place at your table, but I'm not coming to you on the basis of what I deserve. I'm coming to you on the basis of who you are, and I have heard that there is plenty at your table for even me. So can I undeservingly have some of it now as a sort of pregame to what you will do?" Okay. And Jesus is stopped by this response because he sees that she gets it better than any of the, quote, children get it. Just before this scene, Jesus is taking a break in Tyre he goes to Tyre to take a break because he just spent some time with the teachers of the law who Jesus said, "Honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me." So he's taking a break from the children, and now he comes in contact with a little puppy who is more worthy of eating at the table than they are. And Jesus is like, "For that answer, yes." Okay? You see, the children of Israel over the years thought that they deserved, at least some of them did, many of them did, they deserved their positioning before God. They said, "We're God's people. Okay? We've earned a special place with God. He loves us. See our muscles? Don't you know who we are?" Okay? God's own people would persistently come to him time after time in their rituals, but they would come to him on the basis of their merits. Look what we do. But this woman knew she had no merits to stand on before Jesus, and so she persistently came to him on the basis of his. She said, "Lord, I know I don't deserve to be at your table, but I also know you have enough for me." This little puppy understood the gospel better than the little children Jesus came to share the gospel with. And this is a reason for pause. So we see, first of all, here the danger of thinking too highly of yourself. This woman put to shame all the children of Israel who for so many years walked down the hall, rolled up sleeves, saying, "God favors us because we're so good." But this Gentile woman knew that the only way to receive healing and freedom from Jesus was on the basis of his merits, not hers. Okay? The second thing we see is the danger of thinking too lowly of God. So if you think too highly of yourself, like the children of Israel that Jesus encountered, you will deceive yourself into thinking that you can stand before God on your own merits. Or you'll convince yourself that you don't need God at all, even though he gives you every breath that you breathe. Okay? So that'll keep you from God. The idea that you think too highly of yourselves, you don't need God, etc., etc. But the other thing that will keep you from God, number one, thinking too highly of yourself. Number two, thinking too lowly of God. What do I mean? I remember the story of a lady who was in counseling for relationship problems that she was having, particularly with her husband. And the lady could be described as an avoider. Anybody here an avoider? She was an avoider because she did not want to talk about certain subjects, and so she just avoided them. And of course, this complicated her relationship problems. And I didn't know this lady, but this is the story that I heard. What she avoided most was thinking about or talking about the painful events of her past, because her experience had been that when she went there in her mind, it brought her to such a place of darkness in herself that she wanted to take her own life. And at least once, she was suicidal. And so she reasoned with herself over the years, hey, if I just never think about or talk about those things, I won't ever feel that way again, and it'll eventually just go away. Anybody told themselves that before? Just avoid certain things altogether? But of course, God will not let us avoid healing for long, so eventually this lady had to deal with all that pain. And what she came to discover in her healing journey was that when she thought about the sins of her past, she always thought of them as unforgivable. And so when she thought about the things she had done, she monstrosized her sins as if to say, God could never forgive me of what I did. She felt she had done so many bad things that God could never forgive her, and as a result, she could never forgive herself either. And so there's this idea in the mental health field today that we can't make people feel too badly about themselves, or they may take their own lives. We can't tell them that what they're doing is wrong because that will make them feel bad, and they already feel bad. But I want to suggest today that the reason people take their lives is not because they think too lowly of themselves, but because they think too lowly of God. say to themselves, the things that I have done are so bad, God could never forgive me. And in this way we say to God, God, your grace is too puny for my sin. Transformation came to this lady when she was finally able to see that all of her sins were but a drop in the ocean of God's grace. Okay. God's grace was bigger than her sin. Her sin was not bigger than God's grace. And so this Cyrophonician woman knew that God's grace was greater. She knew she had no merit of her own upon which to stand. She knew she did not deserve to have a hearing before Jesus, that he did not even come for her and her people. But she had such a view of God's goodness that her sin did not seem like an immovable mountain. She knew that if she kept asking, God would fill her from the overflow of his table. And so you say, well, that sounds good, Shaun. We don't know what I've done. Well, you don't know what he's done, right? There are enough crumbs at God's table for any wanting puppy, no matter the puppy's past. And I want you to see how backwards this is to most people today. Most people see their sin and they run from God. This woman saw her sin and her unworthiness and ran to God. Why? Because she believed he was good enough, not because she believed she was good enough. She believed he was good enough for her, not that she was good enough for him. She believed he would give to her out of his goodness, even if he found no goodness in her. She believed that his grace was greater than any sin she brought to him. And so she ran to him with it. And so, folks, if you ever come to a place in your life where you think your sin is bigger than God's grace, you have a Tonka truck God. Your God's the size of a Tonka truck. Okay? The problem with suicidal ideation is not that we think too lowly of ourselves, but that we think too lowly of God. We believe our sins are so big that they could swallow up all the food on God's table. And the truth is, you have no idea the spread on God's table. Okay? John Newton, a pastor, wrote a pastoral letter to a man who was very depressed. And here's part of what he said. He said, you say you feel overwhelmed with guilt and a sense of unworthiness. Well, indeed, you cannot be too aware of the evils inside yourself. But you may be, indeed you are, improperly controlled and affected by them. You say it is hard to understand how a holy God could accept such an awful person as yourself. You then express not only a low opinion of yourself, which is right, but also too low an opinion of the person, work, and promises of the Redeemer, which is wrong. Okay. Folks, it is just as much an insult to God, just as much a rejection of God to refuse to seek God persistently for that which you do not deserve because you think he's not big enough to give it to you, than to think that God owes you something. It's just as much of a spit in God's face to think your sin too big for God to handle than to think you don't have any sin that God needs to handle. Okay? You see, both will keep you from God and lead you to self-righteousness. In the first place, you think too much of yourself. In the second place, you think too lowly of God. Okay? So the danger we see here, number one, is the danger of thinking too highly of ourselves. I don't need God. I'm going to come to God based on my own merits, and I don't need him. Okay? The second danger is the danger of thinking too lowly of God. We don't come to God persistently or at all because we believe our sins are more than God can handle. And God's like, really? Really? You think I'm that small? Okay. And then thirdly, I want to talk about getting out of the danger zones. Getting out of the danger zones. The danger zones in life are the ones that we just discussed. On the one hand, there is the danger of thinking too highly of yourself, right? You're good enough, you're smart enough, you're clever enough, you're spiritual enough without God. And this side of danger leads to pride, right? You don't need God or anyone. Life becomes about you and your pleasures, and you become blind to just how far from God you actually are. And, of course, in the end, your eternity is separate from him too. But the danger on the other side is to think too lowly of God. It's not a danger of thinking too lowly of yourself. You probably can never do that, right? We're dust, although we're incredibly loved dust, right? It's not a danger of thinking too lowly of yourself. It's a danger of thinking too lowly of God. God could never forgive me. I've sinned too much. I could never be redeemed. God would never want me. If I walked into a church building, it would fall on me. But maybe I'll go to Pittman's because that's different. Right? I'm so bad that the love of Jesus Christ could never come to me. You think too low of God. Your God is the size of a Tonka truck. You belittle God and exalt yourself in a twisted sort of way. Right? And of course, in the end, your eternity is separate from God too, because you never thought that God was big enough to handle your stuff. So how do we get out of and stay out of these two danger zones? Well, I think the answer is found in this passage. And it's the word persistence. Persistence. If you're in the first category, you need to come to God persistently to ask Him to open your eyes to your need for Him. You need to say to God, God, I struggle with arrogance. I struggle with self-reliance. I don't think of calling on you until something really bad happens, and this shows me that I don't really understand my minute-by-minute need for you. God, would you open my eyes to my need? If you're in this category, this first category, you need to persistently come to Jesus with this confession and ask Him to open your eyes, because you're in danger of being your own God. But now if you're in the second category, you need to come to Jesus persistently to ask Him for that which you do not deserve. You see, that is the power of this woman's faith. She knows she does not deserve anything from the Master, and yet, because she knows He is good, not because she believes she is good, she persistently comes to Him for what she does not deserve. And this is contrary to nature. Nature will teach us that I will not ask for stuff I don't deserve. So I won't ask my coach to be the starting quarterback if I don't feel like I deserve that position, right? I won't ask my boss for a raise or a promotion if I don't feel I have earned a raise or a promotion. I'll not ask the Home Depot to give me supplies to build my new deck unless I come with money in hand to earn those supplies, right? You would never walk into Home Depot and say, hey, would you give me $1,000 worth of decking supplies? I don't have money to pay for it, and I don't intend to pay for it. But would you give it to me anyway, okay? You would never say that, nor would you be offended if they said, no, please leave my store. This woman shows remarkable faith because she persistently asks for that which she knows she doesn't deserve. She knows she deserves nothing from God, and yet she asks for a very big thing. Would you heal my daughter? Okay. Listen, if you've ever been angry at God, it's because you felt He owed you something. This woman knew God owed her nothing, and yet she asked anyway, persistently. So if you're in this second category, you need to persistently come to Jesus to ask Him for that which you do not deserve. But don't sabotage your prayer by saying, God, you owe me this. You promised. Okay. God owes us nothing, right? But your faith in His goodness, not your confidence in your own, should compel you to ask Him anyway. That there's enough crumbs to fill any sorry soul, right? So would you come to Him persistently for 5 things? Would you come to Him persistently for forgiveness? Asking Him to forgive you and asking Him for the strength to forgive yourself. Would you come to Him persistently for comfort? When you feel low, when you feel stressed, when you feel depressed, do you persistently come to Jesus, or do you stop coming to Him then? Would you come to Him persistently for purpose? Would you ask Him to show you how He wants to use your gifts and talents in this world? Toward what end? Toward what initiative? Maybe even persistently ask Him how to be a better contributor to the life of this church family. And would you come to Him persistently for clarity? Clarity on how to understand and engage with the world as we see it now. Clarity on what He would have you do and not do. Clarity on how He would have you vote or not vote. And a small word about that. As Christians, we cannot vote for anyone who will encourage or legalize sin, and we are concerned with sin in two overarching categories, not one. Sin of sexual morality and sins of greed. We cannot support anyone who will promote or legalize sexual morality and its consequences, and the consequences of such are children out of wedlock, abortion, sexual exploitation of women and children, sexually transmitted diseases, among others. But neither can we vote for anyone who will encourage or legalize greed and its consequences. And the consequences of greed include an abuse of the environment for monetary gain, legalizing all types of businesses under the sole criteria of will it make money. Folks, the fact that part of the revenue flowing into New Hampshire comes from liquor stores is an example of legalizing all types of business under the sole criteria of will it make money. We can't complain of an addiction issue in our state and then throw up a liquor store in every corner because the revenue will help us pay for our roads. Okay. Now, will taking away liquor stores stop our addiction problem? No, but if I care about those who are addicted, I will not ask what business can I start that will make money. I will ask what business can I start that will meet a genuine need or pure desire of my neighbors. And I'll trust God with the money. Okay? And so if you haven't noticed, the Democrats are the first ones to legalize and promote sexual immorality in our land, which is wrong. And the Republicans are the first to legalize and support greed in our land, which is equally wrong. And in this way, voting will not be easy. Okay? So we better pray persistently. Okay? This Cyrophonician woman showed remarkable faith because she believed God was good, but she had not even seen all of his goodness. We have. On the cross, Jesus got up from the heavenly banquet to give us his seat. On the cross, Jesus offered mankind the biggest thing they needed and the biggest thing they did not deserve. He offered mankind forgiveness of sins. He offered us not just crumbs one day, but a feast before the Father. He offered us a seat at his table. But he offered it to us by giving up his seat for us. We needed someone to pay the debt that we could not pay in order to sit at the table we did not deserve to sit at. And Jesus did both for us. He paid our debt and made us to sit with him in the heavenlies. And that's the gospel, folks. The good news is not that with enough effort in life you can make it to heaven. The good news is that you could never make it to heaven on your own, and so Jesus came to make a way for you. But will you come to him for that which you do not deserve? Will you come to him for that which you do not deserve? Will you come believing he is good, not that you are good? Would you come confessing and repenting of the sins that he needed to forgive? Would you come and be baptized today and begin your journey with Jesus? Would you join us at Water's Edge as we surrender all to Christ in our city and seek one for Christ? Every Cyrophonician woman, folks, is eternally significant in God's eyes. Every child, every Laconia citizen. And so let me ask you, are you persistently asking God for the things you don't deserve? Are you persistently asking God for the souls of lost people in this city? Will you ask for forgiveness? Will you ask for clarity? Will you ask for comfort? Will you ask for purpose? What are you persistently asking God for? And what is your next step? As the music plays, we're going to stand. We're going to form two lines. We'll space out into family groups. You'll come and you'll take the cup that has the bread on top, and if it's appropriate for you, spend some time at the front, confessing, repenting perhaps, recommitting yourself, redevoting yourself. I'll be standing off to the stage as well if you need to talk. But what is your next step? Grab your cup and then return to your seat, and we'll take communion together. Let's stand.